Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeoun time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with OK Jersey. Hey, going. Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeoun. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by OKJersey.com. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with OKJersey.com. Looking for football shirts? Head over to OKJersey.com and enter the discount code Harry for 8% off. How we doing, everybody? How we feeling ahead of that big trip down to the Amex Stadium tonight? It's a big one. Every game for the Arsenal right now. I keep saying it, but it's so true, isn't it? Feels like a cup final. Every game has potentially quite big ramifications. Interesting that tonight we play at exactly the same time as Manchester City. There's no we play first or they play first, which can add pressure. There's none of that tonight. We're both playing at exactly the same time. We can't afford to even think about one another. We've just got to go out there and deal with the task in hand. For what it's worth, I don't see Nottingham Forest getting anything at the Etihad. Had it been at the City ground, new manager, Nottingham Forest desperate, obviously, to survive in the Premier League, then maybe I'd be looking at that game and saying, potential banana skin. At the Etihad, I'm just not seeing it, if I'm being honest. So tonight is must win for the Arsenal. There's no dancing around that fact. There's no talking it down in terms of the game's significance and importance. We simply have to go to the Amex and we have to come back with all 3 points. Elsewhere in the Premier League last night, bit of a shock result down at Molineux. Liverpool losing against Wolverhampton Wanderers in dramatic fashion. Wolves with another late goal. And getting an impact, getting a result, having an impact against one of the bigger teams in the league. Now, I saw some Arsenal fans, and I know that some of it was being done in a kind of light-hearted way. I know some of it was people being facetious, but this doesn't in any way, shape, or form make our point at Wolves a good one. Let's just be clear on that. We were 2-0 up. We're chasing a title. Our standards need to be much higher. But I suppose given that Arne Slot keeps kind of indirectly having a pop at us, our style of play, that's extended to criticism of the Premier League in general, it was quite nice to see him humbled once again. But yeah, it's not one of those things that I look at and I go, oh, well, that makes me feel better. Because, I know a lot of people will try to see it that way, not because they're deluded, but because that's how they cope, right? That's how they cope with the disappointment that we suffered when we went up to Molineux just a short while ago. So you try and find ways, don't you, of making yourself feel better? Well, no, I don't feel any better. In fact, it's just, there's no getting past that one, is there? If we don't go on to win the Premier League this season, that's going to be the one that we're going to look at. 2-0 up with what? 25 minutes or so to go, whatever it was. That's the game that we're going to look at and we're going to go, that was the one. That was the one where we let it slip. Because Brentford away, the draw that we sort of suffered prior to that, away against a very good side, a very physical side, a very powerful side. Wolves are not that. They've improved under Rob Edwards, but they're not that. Come on, if we're being honest. Let's say a few hellos actually to some of you joining us in the live chat. We've got Samuel's with us, Thomas is with us, Lyle is with us. I did put a what's it called? A poll. That's the one. I'm a little bit out of sorts this morning. I did put a poll in the live chat asking whether or not you guys would make changes to the side for tonight's game. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. Lots of you commenting on that first thing, bright and early. Lyle says, how much are you enjoying the unification of the Arsenal fan base and journalists? Yeah, do you know what? It's nice, isn't it? Because I think too often as a fan base, we're kind of at loggerheads with each other. And listen, I'm not saying that people shouldn't have their own opinions. Those opinions are more than welcome, and I think it's actually good that we have kind of a wide variety of opinions. Maybe I didn't always see it like this, but I do now. Maybe I'm getting older and wiser. I don't know. I don't mind differing opinions. What I want, though, is to see, particularly when we're in a good place like we are now, right? We're top of the Premier League. We're in the Champions League. We're the favourites to win the Champions League. We are in the League Cup final. We are one of the favourites to win the FA Cup. I think when I last checked, Manchester City were favourites. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, we all have our opinions on certain players, on certain decisions, on certain other things that you can debate until the cows come home. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when we are being attacked, and we are getting attacked a lot, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, so I don't want to go down that road again, but when the narrative is one that is designed to damage us, one that is creating divide among us, divide already exists because we all have different views and we have different opinions. But when those narratives are threatening to drive a wedge between us even more and to create a sort of dark scenario that isn't there at the moment, what you got to do is you've got to wake up, smell the coffee, look around at one another and say, we're all Arsenal guys, okay? And we cannot let this pass. We have to push back and we have to fight back against nonsensical analysis, really poor analysis. And it is our duty as supporters of this football club not to nod and say, yes, sir, every time the club makes a decision, even if it's one that we disagree with, but to defend the club against unfair criticism and against those clearly engineered narratives that are designed to get clicks, to rile people up, to wind people up. I think us being together to deal with that is going to make that a lot more bearable for us as we proceed into the kind of late stages of this season. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I am indeed. Right. Let's start looking ahead to this game then at Brighton tonight. I'll be heading down to the Amex this evening. Really, really looking forward to getting down there. Not looking forward to the drive. Definitely not looking forward to the drive back, but I'm driving down with a few friends. And we've done a fair few away games together over the last few years, and it's always been a great laugh and great fun. The only thing is that when we get there, I then go off and do my work, and those guys get to get on the beers and enjoy the game. But anyway, should be a good trip. Look, Arteta spoke yesterday to the media. I was in the press conference yesterday, just for full transparency. There were question marks with regards to the fitness of some of our players. Still no update really from Mikel Arteta on Odegaard. We have to wait and see. He said that Kai Havertz did part of yesterday's session, but they're obviously being very, very careful with him. Declan Rice is one that they're waiting on, but I suspect that Declan Rice will be okay. Mikel said that he was feeling a lot better yesterday, so I'd imagine that he'll be available. Raya and Dowman are both fit, but there is still no Ben White. That's as far as the injury news goes. As I say to you lot a lot, right? I don't get to go first in these press conferences, right? I'm normally sixth, seventh, sometimes even further down the pecking order, which means that by the time it gets to me, all the kind of obvious stuff has already been asked. And sometimes it's been asked multiple times in slightly different ways. And you get a feel for how the manager's feeling. Like, for instance, yesterday, and I think this will come across in the video as well, when you watch it on Haters TV, I think he got irritated with the sheer volume of questions about set pieces. Now, I know that these people, in a lot of cases, have editors on their back. I know that in a lot of cases, they got people telling them, this is what I want you to go and get from the press conference. I'm very, very fortunate that I don't really have that. I'm kind of allowed to get on with it and ask the questions that I think are the right questions. And I'm always looking for something that's a little bit different to what the general narrative is, because with all due respect, if it's going to go out, let's say, on the BBC London sports show on Wednesday night, right? Or on Tuesday night. So if I go there Tuesday afternoon, it's going to go out on the sports show on Tuesday night. The big headlines, like the main stuff, you'd have seen it on the main BBC website. You'd have seen it on Sky. You'd have seen it picked up by every newspaper by that point. And so I'm looking for something that gives us the ability when we do our sports show to have a slightly different conversation. Why? Because we are later to the party. And that's why I try and ask things that are a little bit different. And I know that frustrates some people. And I often get messages saying, why didn't you ask this or why didn't you ask that? I've got to do what the right thing is for my job. And also on top of that, if you see he's getting irritated about the set piece questions, why the hell are you going to ask it again and get a very, very short, abrupt, and unhelpful answer in terms of what you're trying to achieve, which is build a story around it. You see what I mean? So that's kind of how I saw it going into yesterday's presser, and that's a bit of insight into how I see it a lot of the time, really, from my position. But I asked Arteta about managing the emotions of everything because I believe that will be our biggest challenge. I think we are good enough. I think we've got the tactical flexibility to do it. We've got the options to do it, despite the injury problems that we're currently experiencing. I maintain that for me, the biggest challenge is how do you manage the emotions in this part of the season? And I was curious to hear what sort of role data plays in our overall game plans these days. We know that data is used with regards to how we approach set pieces and in various other elements of the game. But in terms of the broader picture, how does data play a role? Because I said this in a rather long X post that I put out last night. I said that I'm not really a data guy. Like, that's not how I was brought up on football. You know, I was brought up on feeling. I was brought up on emotion. I was brought up on what the eye test tells me. And I think I've got a good eye. But the data stuff, I've got a difficult relationship with it, if that makes sense. Because on the one hand, I think it's really, really helpful. And there are huge examples of clubs that have used data to great effect and have been punching above their weight as a consequence and as a result of that. And I know that there's some great podcasters out there. For example, I love listening to Arsenal Vision. Elliot's a big data guy. Elliot does data really, really well. Clive uses data in his points he's making, but I think Clive sees it a bit more like me, which is the data should, and he could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he sees it the way I do, which is data should be there to reference and should be there to confirm or make you rethink something, but it shouldn't be the be all and end all in our analysis. And so my point that I'm trying to make is there's loads of guys out there that do really amazing content with the data at the heart of what they do. But the more I see that creep into kind of analysis and the more I see it sort of leading the way in terms of some of the conversations we have around Arsenal, the more curious I've become with regards to how much of an influence it has on your broader game plan. Not just, well, the data tells us that if we take a corner and we put the ball into X area, there's a higher probability of us scoring. What I'm essentially wondering is, what does it tell us in terms of formation, system, passing patterns, etc., etc.? How does it then translate from the paper that it's written on to the football pitch that the game's played on? Do you see what I mean? So that was kind of what I wanted to know from Mikel Arteta. Let's have a listen to what he had to say on those two questions.
Hi, Mikel.
Hi.
This has the potential, obviously, to be an amazing season for Arsenal. The team's established. You've been building it over a number of years. You've shown tactical flexibility. Do you think the biggest challenge between now and the end is managing the emotion that everybody keeps talking about around the club as you try and achieve all those amazing things?
Yeah, I mean, and those emotions are going to be different now, but we have managed a lot of emotions the last 8 months, and the deal from here to the end is going to have to do a lot of things that are nothing to do with emotion as well, to continue to be here and to hope to win what we want to win.
And you talked about how the game's changed and adjusted, and there's obviously some trends in Premier League football now that maybe weren't there a few years ago. Do you think data's played a massive part in this, and how much of a role does data play in tactical approaches and game plans nowadays?
Well, data, the education that we all have, I think the influence of a lot of countries within the league, and then, what we learn from other teams, from other leagues, from other managers, that everybody is implementing it in the system. So it's a very rich system in the Premier League. We all learn from each other, and the game becomes more and more complicated. And if not, we have to do something. We have to agree. There are certain ways that we cannot play football. You cannot go man-to-man. We're going to see tomorrow it will be a different league, believe me. So that's choices that we have to make. But if everybody wants to be more competitive because it's more efficient and this and that, then we have to accept that it's going to be a change.
That was Mikel Arteta speaking to me at yesterday's press conference ahead of the trip to Brighton this evening. Some interesting points made there, I think, by the manager. And on those two questions and on those two topics, we did a little piece on Patreon, which you can check out. We talked around that clip quite a bit, broke it down, analysed what Mikel was saying. I shared some of my thoughts on the subjects as well. You can check that out. It's available now on our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/the Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description. Go over and have a look. Right, short pause. When we come back, we're going to share with you a 11 for tonight's game. We're going to talk about some of the choices that Mikel Arteta has to make. I'm going to share some statistics with you, and we're going to continue building up to the big one tonight. You're listening to the Chronicles of Aguna. Don't go anywhere. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with okjersey.com. Looking for football shirts? Head over to okjersey.com and enter the discount code Harry for 8% off. What can we expect from tonight's game stylistically? I think that you're going to see a Brighton side come out and play us. I think you're going to see them want to be on the front foot, be aggressive. I've heard some people in the past say that the Amex Stadium's got no atmosphere. I kind of disagree with that. Whenever I've been there, when they're right behind the team and they're feeling good about themselves, they can generate quite an atmosphere. They've won back-to-back games in the Premier League, and that's off the back of what was a disastrous run of form, one that was sort of prompting some to discuss Brighton as potential relegation candidates. There was a fear that they could slip down into the mix, and before you know it, you can slide very, very quickly in this division. You've got a relegation battle on your hands, but they have turned it around a little bit. Talking to Perry Groves the other day, who's covered a fair few Brighton games of late, one of the things he said they've done differently recently is that they've brought some of the more experienced players back into the kind of the forefront of things. Your Milners, your Welbecks, etc., etc. Welbeck's having a wonderful season, by the way. And that has aided them in terms of just getting back on track. Is there a little bit of needle in this one as well? I would have said previously that there wasn't. We used to have the whole Neil Mopai thing. But the more I look back on that, the more I just think that Matteo Guendouzi was a bit of I won't use the word. And, it complemented, didn't it, what Neil Mopai was. Maybe still is. Who knows? Anyway, but is there a bit of needle? Well, it feels like Fabian Hürzeler was firing shots at Arsenal in the lead up to this one. In his press conference, he talked about how Arsenal take too long over set pieces and all the rest of it. Listen, I got to be honest. I've interviewed Fabian Hürzeler probably 2 or 3 times. As a BBC London reporter, I'm not required always to interview the manager from the non-London club, right? So, for example, if I did Arsenal Brighton 9 times out of 10, I won't have to do the Fabian Hürzeler interview. But I'll always be in the room for them because they're all done in the same room. So I'll always be there or thereabouts. And sometimes I've heard from Fabian Hürzeler. I was down there a few times last season covering some other London clubs. I think I did Spurs' trip there as a commentator. I think I did West Ham's trip there. So I was assigned quite a few. I sound like Liam Rossini now. I was assigned quite a few games that involved Brighton last season. Maybe because I'm one of the only Muppets that's willing to drive down there every time. But anyway, and whenever I've been in a room with Fabian Hürzeler, I find him abrupt. I find him a little bit cold. I get it, off the back of a disappointing result, you don't really want to be there. You don't really want to be doing these things. So your tone is different and your demeanor is different. But I've always found him to be a little bit dismissive of the people that are asking him questions. And, maybe that's what's required, that thick skin, that hard exterior to get on in this job. But yeah, he's had a little pop at us. Mikel Arteta did the right thing, I think, yesterday, and basically not paying any attention to it, failing to even acknowledge what Fabian Hürzeler said and giving it the old, I haven't seen those comments and I don't know in what context, as if to say, I'm Mikel Arteta, I'm the manager of Arsenal, we're pushing for the Premier League title, and I could not give a hoot about what you say about my team. Our job is to come there and our job is to beat you. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, listening to Fabian Hürzeler say things like that, it does fire me up that little bit more. It does wind me up that little bit more. And hopefully the players can channel that in the right way and go out and make a real impact tonight down on the South Coast. If we have a look at some of the statistics that the BBC website are floating around today, Brighton and Hove Albion have won 2 of their last 11 Premier League matches against Arsenal, drawing 3 and losing 6, with both wins coming at the Emirates in April 2022. That was a 2-1 victory, and they beat us 3-0 in May 2023, right? So Brighton at home don't win against us, generally speaking. I don't want to curse it. I don't want to jinx it. But if you're looking at the record books, they should give you encouragement rather than anything else. Arsenal lost 2 of their first 3 Premier League trips to the Amex against Brighton, but haven't lost any of their last 5 visits since the 2020-21 season, with won 3 and drawn 2. There was a point where going to Brighton was a big problem for us. We were a very, very different team then. We've come through that. We're a much stronger outfit, and you can see. And I'd imagine if you look at our record against most sides in the division over the last 3 years, let's say, there's been a significant improvement and turnaround from where we were prior to that. Arsenal are unbeaten in their last 19 evening, which means 7 p.m. or later, Premier League matches since a 2-0 home loss to West Ham in December 2023. However, all 3 of those games so far in 2026 have finished level. There was the 0-0 with Liverpool, there was the 1-1 with Brentford, and the 2-2 with Wolves. So although we're not losing these evening games, we need to start winning them, because that's 3 in a row now that we have failed to get over the line in. And we were talking a little bit about how Brighton might approach this game, how they'll probably come out and play us in a far more aggressive style than some of the other teams that we regularly face. And this is interesting, because I think this does speak to the challenges that we face versus the very different challenges we face when we play at home, generally speaking. Victor Gyökeres, former Brighton player, of course, has been involved in 6 goals in his last 7 away games for the Arsenal in all competitions, 5 goals and 1 assist, having scored just twice in his first 12 on the road for the Gunners. So he's clearly improving. I didn't think he was very good against Chelsea, but I've kind of made my peace with the fact that that's the way it's going to be with Victor Gyökeres. He's going to blow hot and he's going to blow cold. And that's just how it's going to be. I don't think he's of a technical level high enough to demand, or not to demand, because we should always demand, but to expect a top level performance like we saw against Spurs every single time. But hopefully tonight's game suits him that little bit better. He's got the space to run in behind, and whether that means he gets through on goal and makes things happen for us, or he creates opportunities and spaces for others, it doesn't really matter, as long as the team and the collective benefit from him being in the side, because I think he starts. So yeah, much improved is Victor Gyökeres overall, but there's still a lot that he could do better, in my personal and humble opinion. Let's have a look, shall we, at the team that I would pick for tonight's game, because I think this is quite an interesting discussion. We put a poll out, which I'll just refer to in a second. Hold on a minute. Let me just share this with you, because that's my team on the screen. I'll read it to those of you listening in just a second. But the poll I put out earlier was, would you make any changes to the 11 that started against Chelsea for tonight? Now, 75% of you say yes. 25% of you say no. I find this really, really interesting, because I have picked the same team barring one. Okay, I've gone Raya in goal. So I guess I fall into the yes category as well. But it's not multiple changes that I'm making. Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and Nkapie are my back 4. Rice and Zubimendi would sit in the midfield for me. Saka, Eza, and Martinelli will play just behind Victor Gyökeres. That's how I'm going. If Odegaard's available from the bench, great, bonus. If Havertz is available from the bench, great, bonus. Some people will probably be tempted to throw Noni Madueke in there, because a lot of us didn't feel necessarily that Bukayo Saka had a great game against Chelsea at the weekend, but the game before against Spurs, he was fantastic. So I agree that we need to use the squad, and we need to protect people, and we need to be careful with certain players, and we need to be careful not to run them into the red. But I think you can do that from the bench. I don't think it always needs to be about shuffling the pack completely from the start. For example, I would probably go into this game with the idea in the back of my head that at some point, if all being well, Noni Madueke is going to come on and take away some of the load from Bukayo Saka. I'd probably look at it and say that Christian Norgaard's going to come on at some point and reduce the load on either Rice or Zubimendi, depending on how they're both feeling and how the game goes. I would probably look at this game thinking at some point I could bring Ricardo Calafiori in, Leandro Trossard. Christian Mosquera has shown himself to be a safe pair of hands. So you can manage these guys' minutes without necessarily making wholesale changes from the start. And the other point I'd argue is that, guys, if we want this title, we got to go out and grab it, right? And we've got to be picking the best team available to us. Time for a rest will come at the weekend, okay? Make 11 changes against Mansfield. No problem. No problem whatsoever. You don't make wholesale changes. You don't take big gambles and risks in a game like this one. I'm sorry, away from home on the night that Manchester City play at the same time. No. Tonight is must win. And tonight is one of those, you know, I talked about Spurs and Chelsea being sort of significant hurdles because of the fact that if you're a City fan, if you're Pep Guardiola, if you're that group of players, you're probably looking at those two games and thinking Arsenal might not win both of them. Brighton is another one of those. You know, if you're banking on Arsenal dropping points, you're probably looking at Brighton from a distance. You're saying they've turned their form around. They're in a much better place. Difficult place to go, the Amex. This could be, you know, a slip up from the Arsenal. We've got to protect against that. So my team is very simple. Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and Capie, Rice, Zubimendi, Eza, Saka right, Martinelli left, because I don't think Trossard has been at it, not against Spurs and not against Chelsea. He's not been at his best. He looks tired to me. Martinelli to exploit that space in behind if we're talking about a team that are probably going to come onto us that little bit more. Eza being able to play those passes over the top for Gyökeres and Martinelli to run in behind, I think that could work really, really well. So that's the team I've gone with. A lot of you disagree with me. I'd imagine if you do see it slightly differently, let me know what changes you would make versus the ones that I've made. Because yeah, I think that this is probably the way to go. Okay, I was just having a look at some of your comments. Here across Jack says that there's a problem with the audio. Is there? Let me know. I can't tell because I can only monitor what's coming out of my my sound mixer thing. So if it's coming through on the broadcast badly, I apologize, and I'll have a look into that. Maybe we just need a good old reboot. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Let's take this one from Thomas, who says, Harry, a bit off topic. There was an Odegaard hoax making the rounds yesterday. A rift and he might leave. It was allegedly a story in a Norwegian newspaper. It was not true. No such story. No, there's nothing in any of that crap. Okay, Martin Odegaard is a big favourite of Mikel Arteta's. Whether he's yours or mine is irrelevant. He's a big favourite of the manager's. He's very, very trusted by the manager. It's fitness issues that have cost him his place in the team. And when Eberechi Eze goes to Spurs and does what he does, and, you know, I would argue that he's really raised his performance level over the last couple of weeks, then that makes it even more. I don't want to use the word difficult. It makes it actually easier to say, Martin, you're not fully fit. Sit this one out. You know, and you know, that's one of the benefits of having that bigger and more talented squad, that you can leave people out when they need to be left out, and you don't have to push them really hard when they're clearly struggling. Jid says, and he looks at football a little bit differently to me, he says data should be the primary measurement, not the eye test. Eyes are connected to subjective brains. How many people are influenced into hate watching their own players and come out of games claiming players with a goal and 2 assists had torrid games? The Premier League table is nothing but data. People who rubbish data want to hide behind eye tests because facts don't follow their world views. I mean, you've put that really well if you're making that side of the argument. But there's a difference between saying that data should be part of the analysis, but not all of it. And there's a difference between dismissing it completely. And I don't dismiss it completely. I just think that the way round you choose to apply it. So whether you choose to apply the eye test first, followed by the data, or if you go data and then eye test, it's up to you, isn't it? It depends how you want to read it and how you want to break it down. I mean, how many people come out of games saying that someone with a goal and 2 assists had a rubbish game? I think that you're sort of highlighting very extreme examples. If I watch someone score and create 2 assists, I'm very unlikely to sit here and say the eye test told me they were crap, if that makes sense. What else have we got in the chat? Lots of you not too keen to see Martin Odegaard in the side. Guitar Solo says, why does your lineup always show up with Zubi and Rice ahead of the defenders? We do not play with a double pivot, not even Arsenal present our structure like that, because I'm using a software on the internet that has very limited formations. I do think there are games where we do play with a double pivot. We do that even more so when Eberechi Eze plays in the 10 position, and Mikel Arteta himself has acknowledged and alluded to that. So I don't know why that's seen as a big deal. But anyway, LSG just on my selection says Nelly Martinelli, that is not good as a starter. I'd rather put Jesus there for now. Once Kai's fit, I'm shifting Eze to the left. Interesting. I do think that I do think that Martinelli's better when he comes off the bench. He's an impact player. I've said that for many seasons. But I think Trossard looks gassed out, and that's why I'd make that change now. Plus, what do you think we're going to face? I think we're going to face a higher line. I think we're going to face a team whom we could expose in behind, and Martinelli's pace gives us a lot in that sense. James Nichols says, Harry, did you see the Premier League are launching their own streaming service? I saw some stories about that probably around the back end of last week. But then I've seen other stories that have sort of rubbished that the Premier League, who, make an absolute shit ton of money from the broadcasters, not just in this country, but all around the world, see it as something that's a bit risky. And also there's a big responsibility on them then to make more programming around the league. And I know they do some programming already that goes around the world. I've been a part of it many, many times. Premier League productions. And when you watch the games from certain territories where, the broadcasters only take the game, for example, and the build-up and the preview shows and all the rest of it comes from a kind of in-house bit of production, there would be more onus on them to do even more of that stuff if they were to take it away from the broadcasters. So they've got a way up. I think that bigger picture, it feels like a good model. As a consumer of football, I like it because I hate the fact that I got to pay for Sky, I got to pay for TNT, I got to have Amazon Prime. It's something that I love, and I'll always find a way to do it. But I don't condone piracy, because I work in the broadcast media, right? I'd be a hypocrite if I did. But when you think about the cost, okay, when you think about the cost to people just to have Sky Sports, but then you've got to have TNT Sports, and then you've got to have Amazon Prime. Again, I'm not condoning it. I think actually what it should do, the fact that so many people are turning to it, is it should send a message to the broadcasters that we need to do something differently here. And we need to think about our structures and our pricing and all the rest of it. I don't condone it, but I'm not surprised that so many people have gone down that route. Nor would I sit here and go, you're a disgrace for doing it. No, I get it, right? Because people love football. But if you've got a family, how can you justify spending all of that money on all those subscriptions if you're in a position where, money's a little bit difficult? Like, do you see what I mean? It has to take a back seat. And that's why so many people are doing what they do. Just on the data versus eye test point, this is a really good counter argument from Joseph, who says data requires interpretation, which can be biased as well. I agree with that. What else have we got? This would be amazing. One streaming service for everything: Prem, La Liga, Champions League. Yeah. Although I don't like streaming. I don't like streaming. Sometimes I'm watching games on Amazon Prime and like friends of mine are like a couple of seconds ahead or a couple of seconds behind. So I don't like the streaming thing. I like the fact that we can get it through the TV, cable or satellite, whatever. But one service would be good. I know that streaming's the way things are going, but yeah, it is what it is. We'll have to see how this develops. But at the moment, although I read those stories, I also read some stories that seem to not rubbish the idea or sort of kill the suggestion that this is coming down the line or is going to happen, but seem to just suggest that this is being considered. This is an idea that the Premier League have. This is something that's being discussed, but we're a long way from making that jump, if that makes sense. Right, let me wrap up today's show with a prediction. I'm going to go Brighton 0, Arsenal 2. I'm going to go Gyökeres and Martinelli to score the 2 goals. I'm going to go one step further today and even give you the goal scorers. Let me know your predictions in the comments section below. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you've left a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. If you want to go on further, you can become a patron. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. The latest piece went out yesterday. It was around those Arteta questions. We talked around them. I shared some more in-depth thoughts on those 2 subjects. Go over and check that out, and I'll bring you some form of reaction. It'll be in short form. It'll be in the form of a YouTube short. It'll be on my Instagram. It'll be on my TikTok. So make sure you're following me on those platforms if you're not already. We'll bring you some reaction from the Amex. And of course, as always, full pod to come on Thursday morning. It will be a pre-recorded edition because I have a funeral, unfortunately, to attend tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So there's no way I'll be live at 10 o'clock. So I'll be up bright and early. I'll record it and it will be released at 10 o'clock as normal, but it won't be live. So if you do have any questions that you want included in that pod, if you think of something after the game tonight and you think, I want to ask that, either get in touch with me via Instagram, X or whatever, or leave the comments below this episode and I'll make sure I have a look at it before I record tomorrow's one. Thank you all so much for all your love and support as always. And I will catch you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeoun time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.